You know, usually when we consider a medical diagnosis, there is an expectation of, well, absolute precision. You think of it almost like um, engineering.
Right, it's very clinical.
Yeah, clinical. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the film, and the doctor just points at the screen and says, there it is. It is binary. It is either broken or it is not broken.
And that is comforting.
It is incredibly comforting. We like things to be visible, to be easily categorized and to have a definitive step-by-step solution. But then you step into the world of ancient literature, specifically the poetic texts concerning human conflict and divine justice, and suddenly that X-ray machine is just broken.
Yeah, you find yourself looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, well, honestly, it is murky.
It is very murky. We get thrust right into the middle of a conflict where the lines between the righteous and the wicked are fiercely contested,
Yeah.
and where the human soul is laid completely bare. So welcome to Reformed Thinking. I am thrilled you are joining us today.
I am so glad to be here to look at this with you.
Today, we are ripping up the floorboards on the translation data from the Net Bible First Edition Notes by Biblical Studies Press. We are focusing intently on Psalm 7, and we will take a brief look ahead at the introduction to Psalm 8.
Which is fascinating, because what looks like a simple prayer on the surface is actually a brutal, ancient legal battle.
It really is. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the intricate Hebrew grammar, the stark, ancient Near Eastern metaphors, and the weighty theological realities of divine judgment, human rebellion, and true justice. We are going to see how ancient poetry communicates massive realities about the cosmos. So let us jump into the opening of Psalm 7. The text immediately throws us into a chaotic situation.
It does. The psalmist is crying out for deliverance from those who are chasing him.
But when I was digging into the translation data for this, I noticed something specific about the grammar in the very first verse. It alters how we should understand the scale of this problem.
The grammatical insight provided in those translation notes for the first verse sets the entire stage. The Hebrew text utilizes a perfect verbal form to describe the hostility the psalmist is facing.
And in Hebrew grammar, the perfect form frequently denotes a completed action that carries continuing, ongoing results.
Yes, precisely. This means we are not looking at a sudden, unexpected flare-up of tension or, a minor skirmish that might blow over by the weekend.
Right. It is not just a temporary argument.
No. The persecution the psalmist is enduring is an established, entrenched reality. The enemies have taken their stance. The hostility is a fixed state of affairs, and the consequences of that hostility are a daily, grinding burden.
So he is waking up every single day in a landscape of active, relentless opposition.
He is. Understanding this verbal form helps us grasp the psychological weight of the text. The author is exhausted. He's living in a permanent state of siege. When you recognize that this is an ongoing condition with continuing results, the urgency of his plea to God makes total sense. He is not asking for a referee to step in and break up a temporary fistfight. He is asking for a sovereign intervention to dismantle a permanent structure of opposition that has been built around his entire life.
That reality of a permanent state of siege makes the grammar in the second verse even more terrifying, I think. There is a very unusual shift happening right there on the page.
Yeah, the text moves from plural enemies to a singular verb.
Right. In verse 1, the psalmist is talking about a whole group of enemies. He literally says, all who chase me, which is plural. There's a multitude of people coming after him. But then in verse 2, the verb suddenly shifts to the singular. He talks about the enemy as a singular entity.
The notes suggest this is a collective singular, which stresses the united front that his adversaries present.
It makes me think of encountering a swarm of bees, or maybe a pack of wolves in the wild. Think about it. If you disturb a hive, you do not perceive the threat as thousands of individual, distinct insects with their own personalities and motivations.
No, you perceive the swarm as a single, unified organism of destruction.
Yes, the cloud of bees acts with one mind. The pack of wolves maneuvers as a single, coordinated hunting machine. That is what is happening in the grammar here. The psalmist is looking at a diverse group of opponents, but their shared hatred for him has erased their individual differences.
They've coalesced into a monolithic force.
It is a terrifying psychological reality when your enemies unite so completely that they act as a single collective beast aiming for your destruction. You see this today, actually. Think about how modern internet mobs operate.
Oh, that is a great comparison.
It starts as a bunch of individuals, but it rapidly becomes a single, mindless entity intent on tearing someone down.
The concept of the collective beast is further solidified by the visceral imagery analyzed in the Hebrew notes for that same verse.
The tearing imagery.
Right. The text uses a singular active participle, translated as tearing, and there is no one rescuing. This specific wording strips away the humanity of the opponents entirely.
So they are no longer viewed as human adversaries.
No, not people you might reason with or negotiate or find common ground with. The language reduces them to the status of a predatory beast tearing at its prey.
And in the ancient world, the threat of wild, predatory animals was a literal daily fear, especially for a shepherd or a traveler.
By applying this specific predatory language to human enemies, the text highlights the absolute vulnerability of the believer in a hostile world. The phrase, "there is no one rescuing," completes the terrifying picture.
It depicts a scenario where the normal social structures of protection have completely failed. The local magistrates, the community leaders, the allies, none of them are stepping in to stop the beast.
The psalmist is entirely isolated. He is cornered by a unified predatory force that is actively tearing at his life. This establishes a massive sense of desperation. When all earthly rescue has failed, the believer is left with only one venue for appeal.
He has to take his case directly to the highest possible authority.
Exactly. I mean, yes, he has no other choice.
Right. So he is completely isolated. The community has failed him. He is cornered by this collective beast. You would think the next step is just begging for mercy, maybe throwing up his hands in defeat.
But he does not do that.
No, he actually goes on the offensive legally. In the 3rd and 4th verses, he brings up this phrase, "the one at peace with me," which totally flips the script. Now, to a modern reader, being at peace with someone might just mean you are friendly neighbors who wave at each other over the fence.
Or maybe coworkers who get along fine in the break room.
Right, you do not have any active beef with them. But the notes clarify that the Hebrew form here, shonimi, carries a much heavier legal and political weight.
It refers to a formal ally or a treaty partner.
This is not about a casual friendship. It is about a binding, formal agreement made between two parties. We are stepping out of the realm of hurt feelings and stepping directly into the realm of international or interpersonal law.
The psalmist is addressing an accusation that he has betrayed a formal pact.
He is essentially standing in a courtroom accused of treason against an alliance, and he is laying out his legal defense.
And the ancient Near Eastern context provided in the translation data clarifies what is at stake in this legal defense. In the ancient world, treaties between nations, tribes, or even powerful individuals were highly formalized.
They had very specific clauses, right?
Yes, very specific non-negotiable clauses. One of the most common and critical clauses demanded that neither party could lend aid, comfort, or military support to the other party's enemies.
So if you formed a treaty with a king, his enemies automatically became your enemies.
That is it. To assist his foes was an act of high treason, a complete violation of the covenant. The translation notes detail a complex grammatical debate in verse 4 regarding the phrase, "rescued my enemy in vain," showing how translators resolve the text to fit this historical reality.
By amending a suffix and understanding the grammar through the lens of ancient treaty language?
Right. The translation reveals that the psalmist is vehemently denying that he gave aid to his allies' enemies. He is defending himself against the specific, fatal accusation of covenant treason.
He is stating for the record that he has upheld the stipulations of the treaty perfectly. He has neither harmed his ally nor secretly funded or assisted the forces opposing his ally. He is claiming absolute innocence regarding the covenant.
And to prove that absolute innocence, he resorts to a startling rhetorical strategy in verse 5.
The conditional curses.
Yes, he uses conditional curses against himself. He says, essentially, if I have done this, let the enemy chase me and catch me. But the language he uses is incredibly severe.
The Hebrew notes indicate that the vocalization of the verb translated as trample assumes the peel stem.
Now, without getting bogged down in linguistics, the notes explain that this specific verbal form indicates a repetitive, continuous action.
He is not talking about being knocked down once in a fight. He is invoking a scenario where his life is repeatedly, continuously crushed and trampled into the earth. And I have to push back on this a little bit.
Yeah.
Why would anyone, even in poetry, invite such violent, repetitive trampling of their own life and their own honor into the dust? I mean, is this just dramatic, poetic flair designed to win sympathy from the listener? Or is there a functional, legally binding oath taking place here before a sovereign judge? It seems incredibly risky to verbally hand your enemies a blank check for your own destruction just to prove a point.
It is entirely a functional, legally binding oath. Understanding the rhetorical mechanism of self-imprecation, this self-cursing, is essential here.
How did that work in the ancient legal system?
Well, when physical evidence was lacking and human witnesses were unavailable or unreliable, the final way to clear one's name was to swear an oath before the divine realm. They genuinely believed that a self-curse would activate the wrath of deities if the person was lying.
So this violent self-curse is not an expression of suicidal ideation.
Not at all. It is a mechanism to establish absolute, undeniable certainty of innocence. By invoking total, repetitive, continuous destruction upon himself, offering up his life and his honor to be trampled in the dust, he is proving to the divine judge that his hands are clean.
And in Hebrew poetry, hands figuratively represent deeds or actions.
Right. He is declaring that his deeds are completely free of covenant breaking. The logic is that no guilty person would dare to call down the active, literal wrath of God upon themselves if they were secretly harboring the sin they were accused of.
The sheer terror of the divine curse acts as the ultimate polygraph test of the ancient world. Let us put it that way, a polygraph test.
That is a great way to think of it.
Okay, so he has sworn the oath, he has passed the ancient polygraph test, and he has filed his legal brief. But who is he handing it to?
He needs a venue.
Yes, that need for a courtroom brings us to an incredible shift in the text around verse 6. The psalmist utters a striking command. He says, "Wake up to me with judgment." He is calling on the divine judge to act.
And the notes provide a crucial clarification regarding the phrase that follows, where he asks God to return on high.
Right, because a casual reading might make you think the text is implying God had somehow lost his position or fallen asleep on the job.
The notes specifically rule out the idea that God has abandoned his royal throne, gone on vacation, or been temporarily defeated, and needs to fight to win his authority back. Instead, it pictures the sovereign king of the universe periodically taking his royal seat to execute judgment.
I liken this to a modern courtroom setting. A judge holds the office constantly. They do not lose their status as a judge when they go home to sleep at night or when they are reviewing files in their private chambers.
Right, the office is permanent.
But when they physically enter the courtroom, walk up the steps and take the bench, a specific session of judgment commences. The bailiff calls the room to order, and the authority of the law becomes active in that specific physical space.
The psalmist is essentially crying out for the bailiff to announce the judge. He is asking the sovereign king to step out of his chambers, take the bench, and open the session of justice.
And the visual details of this divine courtroom session are staggering once the judge takes the bench.
Whoa, they are. The notes describe a hyperbolic assembly where all the nations of the earth are gathered and surround the divine throne.
This is not a local magistrate's hearing settling a property dispute. This is a cosmic tribunal. The psalmist pictures the entire world order pausing to witness the proceedings.
But there is a linguistic detail in the translation data that elevates this scene even further. It concerns the Hebrew form alay, which appears in verse 8.
How does that change things?
Well, traditionally, many translations treated this as a preposition over creating a somewhat awkward, clunky sentence. The translation notes, however, correct this by identifying alay as a divine title.
It is derived from the root word for ascend, is it not?
Yes. Even more fascinating is the historical context provided. This specific title was used in ancient Ugaritic literature as an epithet for the Canaanite storm god, Bel.
Really? So by using this title here, the Hebrew text is engaging in a direct theological polemic.
That is it. Yahweh is actively reclaiming the title of the true Most High. The text is declaring that Bel is not the one who ascends to the throne of the cosmos. Yahweh alone is the sovereign judge.
He possesses absolute linguistic and cosmic supremacy. He is the only one qualified to hear the case.
But to understand how the judge examines the defendants, we first have to understand who the defendants are.
Right. The notes define the term the wicked as it is used throughout these poetic texts. It describes people who are proud and who function as practical atheists. They hate commands, they commit sinful deeds, they lie, and they slander.
But the phrase practical atheists really stands out to me.
It means that even if these individuals verbally acknowledge that a deity exists, maybe they even attend religious services or use religious language, their daily actions, their business dealings, and their treatment of others are completely devoid of any fear of divine consequence.
They live entirely as if the judge does not exist.
And when the judge does examine them, the biology of the examination is wild. The text says God tests hearts and kidneys. I have to ask about this specific biological imagery because my mind immediately goes to, filtering toxins.
Yeah, biological functions.
Why kidneys? When we talk about morality today, we talk about the brain, or maybe metaphorically the heart. How does ancient Hebrew anatomy map onto a person's moral character? What is the judge actually looking for when he examines renal organs?
It sounds bizarre to us because, as you mentioned, we map morality and decision-making onto the frontal lobe of the brain. But the anatomical imagery here is a perfect representation of how ancient Near Eastern cultures understood the human internal life.
How do they map it out?
In their anatomical mapping, the heart and the kidneys were viewed as the deepest, most hidden recesses of a person. They were considered the seat of volition, the center of the conscience, and the engine of moral character.
So the kidneys represented the most secret motives and the deepest emotional realities that a person hides from the outside world.
Yes. So when the text says the judge tests the hearts and kidneys, it means the examination is absolute and exhaustive. The judge does not just look at the hands, the external deeds, or the public relations spin a person puts on their actions.
He dissects the internal motives.
He peels back the layers of self-deception, the religious language, and the societal reputation to look directly at the raw conscience. There's no hiding a practical atheism from a judge who examines the kidneys. He sees the pride and the hidden hatred of his commands with perfect, terrifying clarity.
That perfect clarity leads to a daily reality mentioned in verse 11, and it is a reality that makes a lot of modern readers intensely uncomfortable. The text states, God is angry all the day.
The notes define this verb as being indignant or expressing a cursing against wrongdoing.
It is an active, continuous anger. This is a difficult concept for a lot of people to swallow, but it connects directly to a reformed worldview regarding the nature of God. We tend to project our own emotional instability onto the divine.
Right. When we get angry, it is usually because we lost control, our patience snapped, or our ego was bruised.
We have a temper tantrum, we yell, and then we calm down and usually regret how we acted. But the anger described here is a fixed, continuous reality of his holy character reacting to human rebellion.
It is the steady, unyielding opposition of perfect light against darkness.
It does not fluctuate based on his mood. He is not waking up on the wrong side of the bed. It is the permanent posture of perfect justice toward unrepentant sin.
That distinction between human emotional volatility and divine righteous indignation is absolutely vital for understanding this text. Because God possesses perfect, exhaustive knowledge of our internal corruption, having tested the kidneys and the heart, and because he maintains a constant righteous anger against that corruption, there is an inevitable consequence.
The machinery of justice must move forward.
Think about it from a legal perspective. A judge who possesses all the facts, feels the appropriate outrage at the injustice committed against an innocent victim, but refuses to pass a sentence is not a good judge.
In fact, that would be a corrupt judge.
Therefore, the perfect knowledge of the examiner and the fixed holiness of his character require an active, corresponding judgment against the unrepentant. The tension in the courtroom has to break.
And this brings us directly to the terrifying reality of how that judgment is administered and what the arsenal of divine justice actually looks like when the judge decides it is time to act.
The arsenal of divine justice is laid out with chilling detail in verses 12 and 13. But before the weapons are drawn, the notes highlight a crucial condition.
Verse 12 has an implied subject, which is the sinner who fails to repent.
The entire machinery of judgment, the whole terrifying arsenal, hinges on this single failure to turn back. The weapons remain sheathed if there is repentance.
But if the sinner does not return, if they remain stubborn in their practical atheism, we see the methodical actions of God in the text. He is sharpening the sword, he is treading the bow, he is preparing weapons of death and making flaming arrows.
The physical description of treading the bow is particularly striking to me.
Right, in ancient warfare, a powerful composite bow could not be strung just by pulling the string back with your arms like you see in movies.
The archer had to step on one end of the bow, pressing it into the ground, and use their full body weight and deliberate, focused exertion to bend the wood enough to slip the string into place.
It requires intense physical effort and absolute concentration. This is not an accidental or passive judgment. It is an active, calculated mobilization for war. The judge is deliberately, forcefully preparing the instruments of execution.
Yes, the physical exertion implied in treading the bow captures the intentionality of divine judgment perfectly. The text leaves absolutely no room for a sanitized, comfortable view of the cosmos, where God is solely a passive observer or a distant clockmaker who just lets the universe spin.
The judge is also the executioner.
When the unrepentant sinner refuses to turn back, they are met with prepared, lethal justice. The sharpening of the sword and the preparation of flaming arrows indicate that the destruction will be both precise and overwhelming.
If we look at the historical context of siege warfare, flaming arrows were designed not just to pierce a single target, but to burn down the entire structure of the enemy's defenses.
They were meant to consume everything the enemy trusted in. It is a terrifying reality. The wrath of God is a mobilized tactical force. Unrepentant rebellion does not just meet natural organic consequences. It meets the active, prepared justice of the Creator.
So while God is actively preparing his weapons from above, focusing his weight on the bow of justice, we have to look at what the unrepentant sinner is doing on the ground. How is the wicked person spending their time while the heavens are mobilizing for war against them?
The text uses a grotesque metaphor in verse 14 to describe this. It says, "The sinner conceives harm and gives birth to a lie."
The translation notes point out that this metaphor pictures the typical sinner as a pregnant woman. This is a brilliant way to look at how evil operates in the human heart. Sin is not depicted as a sudden accident.
You do not just trip and accidentally ruin someone's life or accidentally commit treason against a treaty partner.
Sin is incubated. It starts as a seed of an idea, a justification, a resentment, a selfish desire. It grows internally. It is nourished by the person's thoughts and actions over a period of time.
The sinner carries it, protects it, and lets it develop until it is finally birthed into the world as a fully formed, destructive reality.
It requires a gestation period of hidden internal rebellion before it becomes a public catastrophe.
The physical actions that accompany this internal gestation are described in verse 15, where the imagery shifts from pregnancy to hunting. The wicked person is actively digging a pit and excavating it to entrap a victim.
This highlights the intensely premeditated nature of the harm they conceived. Digging a pit deep enough to trap a human or a large animal requires significant, sustained manual labor.
The sinner is sweating, toiling, and investing their energy into creating a hidden danger for someone else. They are consumed by their own autonomous desire to control and destroy the righteous.
But the resolution we see in verse 16 displays the perfect symmetry of divine justice. The harm the sinner conceived, that incubated evil they nurtured for so long, returns on their own head.
The violence they intended for others comes crashing down on their own forehead. The text describes the evildoer falling into the very trap they spent so much time excavating.
That symmetry is incredible. It's the ultimate poetic justice. The effort they expended to destroy the innocent becomes the exact mechanism of their own destruction. It is as if the universe is wired to fold their malice back in on itself. You spend weeks digging a pit in the dark, and you end up at the bottom of it.
Theologically, this reveals a primary mechanism of God's judgment. Very often, divine justice does not require a lightning bolt from the sky or a miraculous intervention. Instead, God simply hands the wicked over to the logical conclusions of their own autonomy.
They demand the right to build a reality apart from God's law, and God allows them to inhabit the reality they have constructed.
The trap they dug for the innocent becomes their own grave, because the structure of their sin cannot support itself. It's a self-defeating enterprise.
The violence they throw upward into the cosmos inevitably obeys a moral gravity and falls back upon their own heads. It is a perfect symmetrical justice that vindicates the innocent and ensures that evil consumes itself.
Right, which brings us to the believer's response. How does one react to seeing this level of sovereign, symmetrical justice carried out?
The believer responds with absolute praise, which we see in the conclusion of the psalm in verse 17. The psalmist says he will praise according to the name of the Lord Most High. That title, Elyon, appears again.
The notes explain that God's name here operates metonymically. It stands in for his divine characteristics.
Throughout the ancient world, a name was not just a label used to get someone's attention in a crowded market. It was a summary of their reputation, their character, and their deeds.
By praising the name of the Lord Most High, the psalmist is praising the exalted ruler of the universe who has just proven his nature by vindicating the innocent and judging the wicked.
The courtroom session is over, the verdict has been rendered, the trap has sprung on the trapper, and the only logical response for the vindicated believer is to publicly declare the righteous character of the judge.
This declaration of praise provides a brilliant transition into the notes provided for Psalm 8.
Psalm 8 is introduced as a hymn to the sovereign creator. It praises his majesty and marvels at the dominion he gives to mankind over the created order.
The translation data also mentions the term gittith, which appears in the heading.
This is likely an unknown musical style or instrument, indicating that this text was designed for a formalized piece of corporate worship.
Contrasting these two psalms provides a complete theological picture for the listener. Psalm 7 presents the bloody, intense reality of the courtroom and the battlefield.
It is focused on the micro level of human conflict, betrayal, and the desperate need for justice against predators.
It shows God rolling up his sleeves, sharpening his sword, and dealing with the ugly, localized reality of sin.
Psalm 8, however, pans the camera out. It shows the macro-level majesty of the Creator who orders the stars, the moon, and the entire cosmos.
Together they offer a comprehensive view of the sovereign God. He is terrifying to the unrepentant rebel, actively preparing weapons of justice, yet he is remarkably benevolent, granting dignity, order, and dominion to humanity within his beautifully structured creation.
That contrast really pulls the entire study together. We see the God who manages the vastness of the cosmos in Psalm 8, and the God who examines the microscopic details of our hidden motives in Psalm 7. And that brings us to a final thought based on the text we have studied today.
What is that?
Well, we spend a massive amount of our time and energy worrying about the pits other people are digging for us. We stress about the hostility of the world, the unity of our opponents, and the traps lying in wait. But considering that the cosmic judge possesses perfect vision and actively tests the kidneys and the heart, peeling back all our self-justification, a much more urgent question arises.
What thoughts, what resentments, and what hidden motives are we currently incubating and pregnant with in our own minds?
Yes, we must examine ourselves before the examiner takes the bench. Thank you for joining this deep dive on Reformed thinking.